Nicely done. We successfully have a single product page where we can display info, stars, also change the colors that we're going to add to the cart or the amount. Now let's focus on the products page. And before we start setting anything up, let me just go over why we're setting up separate context. Because technically, like I have already mentioned, probably quite a few times, you can jam everything in a product. We already have functionality for the sidebar, correct? We're already fetching the product. So we might as well set up the filter functionality and sort and everything else there as well. But it's going to be harder and harder to manage. So that's why we'll set up another context, which is just going to be responsible for filtering, for sorting, and then also changing the view. So there's going to be a grid view and a list view. Again, let me just be very clear. The whole reason why we're doing that is because I would want to make it easier as our project gets bigger. Because then I know if I have to set up something in the filters, I just look for that context, set up the functionality over there, and I'm in good shape. Technically, if you want to, you can still jam everything in the product. So I'm going to navigate to my filter context, which at the moment should have only the boilerplate. And now there's one more thing that I would want you to think about. When it comes to filtering, we really need two things. We need all the products, but we also need this default value. So essentially, if I start filtering, notice at some point, I would want to go back to all the products, right? Otherwise, if I just start filtering and eventually user gets to one product and he or she wants to go back to the default, well, how am I going to do that if there is no such option? So of course we have a option to clearing the filters. That's why it is going to be very important for us to set up two instances with products. So we're going to have one instance in the product, which we're going to filter. So change, well, how big is the array? For example, if it matches the filters, then of course it's going to be returned. If not, then we'll dump it from that array. But there's always this default array that has all the products. So if we ever have to, we can go back to the default. So notice in this case, we have 3 products and we go back to the default. And the gotcha here is, well, how we can get those products from the products context to the filter context. Because I would want to have a separate context for my products page. So if we navigate back, of course, I have filter context. And if I take a look at the products context, where I have all the products, of course, that is in the products property right here, which in the beginning is an empty array. And then eventually we fetch all the products. Now, the gotcha here that, of course, we are using the hook, correct? We have this hook, where it is. We have use products context. That's the hook. And the thing is, I cannot go to the filter reducer because we also have reducer for filter, which we're going to use. I cannot go over here and just grab those products and add to the state. Why? Well, because it is a hook. And this is a simple function. So remember rules of hooks. When we had a hook, we could either invoke it in a React component or in another hook. Now, when it comes to filter reducer, it's neither. It's just a simple function. So what we're going to have to do is set up a action that actually takes those products from the products context and dumps them into the filter context. And you can probably already guess that I set up that action. So if we take a look at the actions.js file, notice after we have get single product, we have load product action. And this is the action that we're going to set up in the filter context. So let's navigate back. We have our filter reducer where we'll set up all the filtering functionality. And we also have the filter context. And also, as a quick side note, you also would want to have multiple contexts in this case because you don't want to jam all the functionality in one reducer as well. So it goes both ways. You want to have a cleaner context file where it's easier to navigate around, and the same goes for reducer. Can you jam everything in one? Like I have already said 20,000 times, yes, but it might come back and bite you as your project gets bigger and bigger. So in a filter context, for the time being, I would just want to set up two state values. I have my initial state. I don't have a user reducer, but I would want to set up two properties. One is going to be for filtered products. So that's going to be the array that's always going to be changing as the user changes the values in filters. And for the time being, it's going to have to be an empty array. And the second one will be that all products one. So this is going to be the case where if I ever need to go back to the defaults, I will have this value as all products. So we have a start. And then the next one is, of course, the user reducer. So let's go here with const and then state. And of course, we're getting back to dispatch. Remember, that was the case. And this is going to be equal to my use and then reducer. And we'll pass in the reducer. In this case, it is a filter reducer. And we pass in the initial state, correct? Now, before we do anything, let's just wrap our application. So we're going to navigate to index.js. And the key here is place the filter provider inside of the product provider. Okay, that is extremely, extremely important because what we're trying to do is get some info from the product into the filter. That's why we need to make sure that we wrap our filter provider in our products provider. So we go here with filter provider and we're just going to wrap our app. So that just ensures that we'll always have access to the data that is coming from the products provider. And then in filter context, now I would want to do two things. I would first want to get my products from the products context. Again, let me go over one more time. Remember, in the products context, we had all the products in the state value, correct? The name was product. So now I would want to grab them. And I cannot just pass them into the filter reducer. It's impossible. I would need to do it through the filter provider component. So in here, first, let me grab those products. So const, and I'm just looking for the products property here. And that is going to be equal to my use and then products context. I invoke it. But then remember, I cannot just pass it into the state directly. I cannot say, hey, listen, put those products into this initial state. That's not going to work. What I would want is to set up my use effect. So when this component mounts, then I would want to dispatch an action, which is going to be load products. And the way it's going to look like, we're going to go with use effect. And then, of course, we have our callback function. But the gotcha is that, remember, products initially is just going to be empty array, even in the products context. That's why as a dependency, we'll pass in the products. So as this changes, as we fetch the product, then again, we invoke the same thing. We invoke the dispatch with a type of products, meaning load product. Sorry, that was the type. So we're going to go with dispatch here, dispatch. And then, like I said, the type will be load product. And then as far as the payload, well, that will be equal to this product. Initially, it's going to be an empty array, remember? And then once we fetch, well, then we will invoke use effect one more time. And as far as the payload, we pass in the product. So now, of course, we just need to handle that in our reducer. So let's navigate to the reducer. And let's see, where is my reducer? I'm going to go to the filter, reducers, and I'm looking for filter reducer. At the moment, I'm just going to return a state, since, of course, we're not handling that action yet. And I'm going to say if action and then type is equal to load products. So triple equals, and then we're looking for load products. If that is the case, then, of course, I would want to change my state values. And the way I'm going to change them, I'm going to go with return, and then dot state, since there's going to be more properties in there. And then this is the biggest gotcha, where remember we have two properties. We have all products and filtered products. Now I would want to set my products that are coming as a payload equal to both of them, but we need to use the spread operator. So in here, let's go with all products is equal to dot, and then action, and then payload. Because remember, that's where the products are located. Now, why we're doing this is because if we'll just set it equal to all products and the same for the filtered products, what's going to happen is that once you filter the products, you cannot go back to the default, because the way the JavaScript works will point to the same place in the memory. So if we use the spread operator, now we're just copying the values, and that is extremely important. If you won't do that, your whole functionality will eventually go bananas. Trust me, I learned that the hard way. And we're gonna go with action and then payload. Again, both of them are equal to my products that are coming from the payload, but I'm using the spread operator. So I'm just copying the values. I'm not referencing to the same place in the memory. And I think we're in good shape. So I can remove this return state. We won't need this anymore. I would want to throw the error if we're not handling the action. And if we want to double check if all our functionality is correct, then of course we would need to navigate back to our project. And again, we're looking for components. And now notice how I have products provider, which of course has all my state values. But then I also have the filter provider because I placed that filter provider inside of the products one, correct? So in the provider, notice how, again, initially it is empty array. We already know that. I'm not going to show that one more time. But once we're done with our use effect, now notice all products and filter products is, and by the way, my bad. I think I messed it up. It should be filter products over here. Let me just double check. And yeah, filtered products. My apologies. Now, both of them are arrays of 17 items. And this is the one that will change as we're filtering. And this one will always stay this default array. And then if we ever need to go back to the defaults, then of course we'll just set the filter products equal to all products. Hopefully everything is clear. And now we can start slowly setting up the return in the products page.